You're welcome to another interesting edition of the Economy and Politics Show, where we discuss key socio-economic developments as they affect the households. Today, we'll be looking at the 2023 elections, examining campaign financing. And my guest is Mr. Malachy Ugwumadu, a lawyer, activist, and former national president of the Committee of Defense of Human Rights. It's nice to have you on the program, Mr. Malachy.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Before we begin the conversation, let us give you a wrap of some major stories from last week. The Federal Executive Council approved the 2023 budget presentation of 19.76 trillion naira by President Muhammadu Buhari, which was presented at the National Assembly last week, Friday. Also last week, Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation Limited announced that it's recorded a profit of 674.1 billion naira in 2021 financial period. The result is coming as global economies continue to struggle with the recessionary forces and weak economic outlook. Those are some of the key stories from last week. If you're joining us, the Economy and Politics Show, and our conversation today is on the 2023 elections, examining campaign financing. My guest is Mr. Malachy Ugwumadu, a lawyer and former national president of the Committee of Defense of Human Rights. Mr. Malachy, let's first begin with the speech by President Muhammadu Buhari to mark Nigeria's 62nd anniversary, where he emphasized the need for issue-based campaigns for the forthcoming 2023 general elections. How critical is that for the polity?
Well, first and foremost, it is gratifying that the president found the need to re-emphasize the question of campaign-based issues as we go into the proper electionary period. However, the road, they say, does not make the monk. It is not sufficient to admonish politicians and then just allow them remain on their own without, as we have found, some serious regulatory effort to ensure that anyone who goes beyond the mark will have some reprimand. I make this point because at that time, what we have seen and observed is that several until these politicians are made to realize that they cannot go beyond the limit to which their penchant drive them, you are likely going to have a total collapse of the system in terms of the tendency towards very unacceptable behavior in political systems. Now, the law is very clear as to what must happen in relation to the conduct of politicians during election periods. For instance, even the Electoral Act under Section 95, makes it clear that it would be unacceptable, it would be wrong for politicians to use intemperate language, very provocative language, abusive language, or even conduct themselves in a way to provoke their opponent and incite people into violence. All of those are provided within the confines of the law, regulating the conduct of politicians during elections. But by and large, I think why that statement is very important is that Nigeria has suffered enormously for, in the hands of politicians that run away from the core cardinal issues that will engender progress, that will turn around the fortunes of Nigerians, and that will position the Nigerian state in a way that guarantees peace, progress, and prosperity. And I think that this is precisely why that emphasis was made. By and large, it is in the interest of even the politicians to know that we have long left that stage where people are interested in how much foul language you use. People are listening keenly. They want to hear what is it exactly that you have by way of manifesto, by way of programs and projects, but by far more important than what you have is the how. How do you intend to bring this about? By what mechanisms, different from the rhetoric have you designed to guarantee that all of these ideas that you reel out do not stop at the level of promises, but how will it crystallize? How will it be actioned? And by what means and mechanisms have you designed and thought through thoroughly to get this back to state? And I think that was a welcome development. The only drawback is that the man who has given the directive did very little in fulfilling his own promise to the Nigerian people. And I think that is the missing link.
Very important. And I mean, issue-based campaigns are very key. And if we follow what happens in a country like Brazil, I think people must learn. It's the lesson of not going into things outside issue-based campaign. Issue-based campaign is very critical at this period. But for our focus today, what is your assessment of the guidelines and provisions for financial expenditure for candidates and political parties? We understand, according to the Independent National Electoral Commission, that there are caps for a campaign expenditure. For example, 5 billion naira is the cap for presidential campaign, 1 billion naira is the cap for gubernatorial campaign, 100 million naira for the Senate, and 70 million naira for the House of Representatives. Is this an effective approach? Is it something that you see INEC showing that capacity to ensure that there's compliance as we build up to these elections?
Well, my starting point would be to bemoan such a polity that even in their legislation, even in the legal framework, clearly gives out this impression, or in fact the reality, that that contest and desire to occupy public offices in Nigeria is heavily monetized. That for me is very unfortunate. I recognize, and I'm not going to run away from the fact that all over the world, politics has become a very expensive enterprise, no doubt about that. When I say politics, I'm specifically referencing aspirations into political offices. But those are at the level of logistics and the general factors of facilitating the process of these electioneering efforts. But to begin to imagine that a presidential candidate will necessarily have to muster a war chest in the region of 5 billion naira in an economy as depleted and comatose as the Nigerian economy clearly tells you that there is a wide gap between our leaders, rulers, and the followers. Now, until there's a breach of this gap, you will continually see the kind of discordant voices, and if you like, very incoherent approach to our political life generally, because you could see that the motivation, the driving force is not exactly service. It's about, it has become transactional. You must be able to have this to be able to assess this position. So if you must assess this position, you must be somebody who could be speaking in the region of this. The fact of a seal is not lost on me. I'm clearly aware that what we're talking about is an amount beyond which a presidential candidate or a senatorial candidate will not exceed. I know that, but I'm saying if we already integrated that into the legal framework that regulates political activities during political seasons, it establishes in the subconsciousness of not just the aspirant, but the followers, that such a person must have at least this region this quantity or this amount of money. I thought that what we should be emphasizing is what we gravitate towards discovering, establishing, ascertaining the quality and content of leadership that we can extract from such aspirants, and not the volume of naira that he must spend. That for me is a starting point and is a big concern that I have. In other words, it is almost counterproductive, very unwittingly, an unwitting step to assert in our legislative framework such there should be some other ways by which we will monitor that. Having made that point, let us therefore interrogate it a bit further, if the time permits us, to say that what is the clear strategy by which the election monitoring body, in this case, the main ombudsman for this process. This is why you see the volatility in the forex during elections.
Okay, Mr. Malachy, let me come in there. Let me come in there so I can give you like at least 2 minutes to wrap up. What should be done? What creative things can be done in terms of the provision as a lawyer? What can we do in terms of ensuring that there's transparency in donations? We have the calls for people can donate that are in diaspora, but that provision is not clear. Crowdfunding options are being explored, but again, there's no clarity on that. So from the legal standpoint, what can be done to review this whole process to bring more transparency and ensure that, like you said, INEC can work with relevant bodies like the EFCC and the ICPC to ensure that there is no excessiveness in campaign financing?
Well, thank you. Since you said we have limited time, let me just reference the 2 relevant sections of both the Constitution and the statutes that are relevant to this issue.
Yes, thank you.
And that is section 225 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and as amended, specifically subsection 3. That section should be read in conjunction with section 85, yes, 85 of the Electoral Act. Now, these laws are to the effect that a political party, mark my word, a political party, not a candidate, shall not be allowed, shall not be permitted to retain or hold on to funds or assets from foreign land, foreign countries. That is in summary what it says. Please, for the sake of time, I just want to make the important point that whereas the idea, the philosophy behind these sections of our laws is to preclude circumstances in which foreign agents, interested foreign collaborators, other than Nigerians, may not have the opportunity to hijack the processes of our electing our leaders, other than what Nigerians, believe through the electionary process. And that is the only way you can ascertain the legitimacy of leadership, where it evolves from the people and not where foreign bodies. So the idea of saying Nigerians abroad, the notion that Nigerians abroad who are as passionate, who are still citizens of this country, cannot gather themselves and make contributions to assist election processes of political parties that they believe in, will be very, very unfair. It will also be illegal, and it will be violative of their fundamental rights. In this respect, I am referencing section 42 of the Constitution, which says you cannot discriminate. You cannot discriminate against any Nigerian on account of his political views or the fact that he's of this creed or lives here or that way. If you exclude them from making inputs into the political process of their country, regardless of the fact that they don't live here, that will be violative of their rights. my position. So that law or those laws are designed carefully to ensure that our election processes, our leadership recruitment processes do not fall in the hands of foreigners. Simplicity. That's the law.
Very clear. Very clear. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Malachy Ugwumadu, lawyer, activist, and former national president of the Committee of Defense of Human Rights, for these insights around campaign financing. We hope to engage you further, because as election is building up and campaigns begin, it's very important that campaign finance is on the radar, seeing how funds are flowing, and of course, effective regulation from the umpire, INEC, and all relevant bodies to ensure that the process is transparent and inclusive. Thank you once again for the time.
Thank you for the opportunity. My pleasure.
Thank you. And that'll be all for this edition of the Economy and Politics Show. You can follow our social media platforms to get updates on developments in the socio-economic space as we build up even for the elections, articles, stories, and videos, all captured on our website, www.proshare.co. Also, you can send your comments, views, and suggestions around campaign financing as the election builds up. What are your thoughts around it? Particularly what has been raised today around diaspora being part of the whole process, and of course, review on the whole electoral process. Send the views, comments, and suggestions to the email displayed on your screen. Till we come your way again, thank you for watching, and have a lovely day.